Okay, guys, don't say fuck. YouTube is live. Oh no, I just said it.
Are we streaming now?
It is on. It is switched on. It's streaming to the world. Anyone goes on our YouTube channel can pick it up.
Cool.
Yeah. They can't comment though. I disable that.
Okay.
I'm authoritarian.
Yeah. No, we don't need comments. So it's still early.
Yeah. Cup of coffee, yes, or would you prefer under the glass of coffee shoes? Like I have some white wine,
Red wine would be amazing.
You want is that
yes, we can all have a bit of this stuff. Yeah, what do you want?
I think
Coffee's better for you right now. Okay, I shall get some liquor.
Are you tired?
I'm not very well.
Oh,
Not good.
Oh,
No, don't worry, it's not good. I've been testing and all. It's just really run down.
You've been doing a lot.
Yeah. So, I'm okay, but I think the reading stuff. Yeah. A lot of
Yeah.
But I think I'll read much of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start feeling myself.
Yeah. Okay. I'm wondering then if I should just read one essay to start and have you read and then me finish up with another essay. Would that be better? Okay.
I'll still do the introduction. Chapter 1 and 2.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if it's just an hour, that's fine. Yeah. Monday night, probably people won't get up. I'm just looking at people. This is Fiona. Fiona, this is Arisa. She's our guest speaker. And here's Kirsten. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Are you here for the event? Have a seat.
Oh, no, we have had it in before, but I don't think we've got it in at the moment. We can put it on order for you and have it by Thursday. That's any look. No? Oh, you need it now, straight away. We don't have it in stock currently. We normally do, but we sold it. Sorry. You don't want one of these?
No, please do.
Like Marzipani something or other.
But I love the fact that it has a Patti Smith.
Oh, I don't know. No, they'll definitely have some. They put some sort of thing around them, which could be coaching with
Patti
you.
Smith.
It's possible. If in doubt, I have no idea what anything's going on. I make no promises. Sorry.
My personal hero. She's coming to a couple of festivals this summer. Yeah, she's going to be in the Eden Festival, I believe. What is that? June. Next month.
Oh, that's
June.
soon.
Yeah.
That's really soon. Yeah.
I've seen her play live. No, even here. But if you Google Eden Festival, it'll come up. But yeah, no, I know someone who's playing, and I was like, that's Patti Smith, and you let this Patti Smith. No, so I'm thinking of going down.
Absolutely incredible. I've seen her live like several times. It's like a really experience. Like, a few years ago, at the anniversary, it was like it's actually when I took the 40th or 50th anniversary courses. It must have been
Oh, it's been around for a while, so yeah.
Did that one come out like 1975? Something. No, you know, they must have been. I hope so. You know what I would say? I think it was 1976, and I bet it was the 40th. But I started playing at the Wolf House in Zurich, and she played the entire album start to finish.
And she's North American too. I just noticed.
The whole set, start to finish. So I've seen the entire Horses album play start to finish. And you know, if she started to play Breaking It, and she starts to like, yeah, I don't like how this started. We're gonna start over. She stops the band and starts over. It's so funny. She's so funny watching her play. And then she did an entire other set after she played all the courses, and it was like my most favorite rock and roll moment of my life. Like up there.
And what's your name?
Alyssa, what's your name?
Linda Marie. And where are you from?
I'm originally from Boston.
Okay, so well, New York.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but I'm also not Scottish.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
This is
Spanish from Salon, North America.
Oh, hey, Taylor. Where are you from?
Vancouver. Oh, cool. Vancouver, I heard. Great.
I grew up in Montreal. Yeah. And then, my mom and dad. My dad was here, my mom was there.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow. And then I immigrated back. Everybody's going in that opposite direction. Like,
Hey, do you like food and drink?
oh, I drink.
Yes.
I suppose so. I thought they were interested.
Mom's breaking out the box wine.
The high caliber box wine. Pleasure. Okay.
Thank you, Tom, so much for this.
Well, this place has all kinds of cons. It has books, it has wine. The only thing we don't have is a toilet. So bear that in mind when you're knocking it back.
What do you have to do when you're here?
Huh?
Did you go to Starbucks?
No, I stick it to the shop next door. But they let me, but they're like, don't let other people in. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
Well, so this might just have to be an hour lunch.
We can all cross our legs, really. Is that what's something?
I would love red wine. Yeah. And now I'm taking the box wine. Thank you so much.
No, this is from the same place as Pablo Neruda.
Is it?
That's not a lie. I don't think he drinks it, but is it? So I think it was his, his favourite, just like knocking back the box wine. But it is the same place, Ilo Negro. No, there's a literary connection. There's no literary connection to this stuff. The literary one, of course. There we are. Red wine is so literary, isn't it?
You're having next weekend is your birthday.
It is indeed, yes. Yeah, 4 years old. When we will get incredibly shit-faced and eat cake. Except the baker just got cut out and said no cake. So it'll be an inferior form of cake. Like I'll buy it out of a shop instead of a bakery. I usually use... Well, yeah, exactly. I usually use Tasty Buns on Bread Street. But they're shot that week for like a holiday.
Thank you. It's
I know them too. I might have to talk to them.
It's so I get my wife here and she bought this for me and I was like fabulous.
I mean, it's very difficult not to know once you've been told, but yeah.
Estate sales. Yeah, she gets it from estate sales. Yes, darling. I love that. She has a shop on Bread Street called Carnival. Carnival? Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something. If you don't like Alistair Chisholm, you will not be welcome in that shop because he's a lovely,
So should I wear
lovely.
it as a jacket then?
I am certain it wouldn't be. Alistair is a computer scientist who used to write Sudoku books. Then he wrote his first kids book, and it was really successful. And he's now just getting inundated with stuff from publishers. He's just writing book after book and doing it really well. He's lovely. His family are lovely. They all come around the shop. Just a nice chat. Yeah.
That was my birthday.
I actually had my graduation.
Yeah. I was like,
I don't think Alistair would be on dating apps. I don't think his wife would let him.
Yeah, I've been looking for like the perfect black motorcycle jacket.
Me too.
I've been feeling like it was 5 years, and I really wanted it to be vintage.
Me too.
And I had all these specifications, but it had to have this ribbon. It had to
Yeah.
have gold zippers. It had to have the zippers on the wrist. It also had to have the ribbon.
It had to be curled.
Yeah, it had to be covered. It had to have all those features. And I would find all these jackets, and they would not have every feature. No. They don't realize it's nice, but they have to. The only feature it doesn't have that has a ribbon.
Which one did you want? The feature? Which feature did you want?
No, the only feature it doesn't have is that it's not vintage.
Oh,
I've been,
yeah.
like holding out for that for a long time. I just
Yeah. I would have liked to have deeper pockets. Yeah, because it doesn't. So I'm often walking like
it's quite like that. You're close.
Yeah. Should we just give it a few more minutes? Yeah. Yeah, it's just 7:02 now.
Yes, indeed. There's red wine, there's white wine. If you want rosé, I can do it 50-50. No.
There's rosé too.
Yeah, I just mix them. That's how you make rosé. That's where it comes from.
That is.
And then you drink it on the terrace. This is, always the way, isn't it? It has to be rosé on the terrace.
This is the first time. Well, in the past couple of days, it's the first time I've been drinking since February. I was on like a cleanse.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's very noble.
It was noble.
Are you clean now?
Not anymore. Not after
Dirty
this
yourself
week.
back up.
Not after this weekend. I'm quite dirtied up. I think we'll just give it a few more minutes and then we'll keep out here. No problem. I guess I could start with why I decided to do this. Yeah, I'll do that. I don't think I need to speak into the mic, do I?
Why not? It's there.
Hello, is it me you're looking for?
You look like you should be singing, too.
Do I? No, I can't.
All right.
Yeah, if I could, I would. Totally. I'd be like Stevie Nicks singing.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here. We didn't expect anyone, so I'm very pleased. I started this salon last year as an idea that happened during lockdown because I don't know, I wanted something that showcased literature in words the way that music is. So I didn't want an open mic, I didn't want a spoken word. I wanted people to come and interact and engage with literature the way you would to see a band. But I also wanted it to be very Edinburgh focused and preferably Leaf so that I could give something back to the community. That's why it's Speakeasy. It's meant to be 2 words so you can speak easy. It is a platform to introduce new authors and established authors, previous authors like Nikki Melville and Tim Diagucci, who's a young adult fantasy writer who wrote this great book that is now escaping me, the name of it. Do you remember?
Library of Death.
Library of the Dead. And it's based in Edinburgh and it's great. I love the cover. But then, the essay I'm going to read tonight, I actually, before it became published, because it was published over the pandemic, wanted to read it at Typewriters. Tom had some open, I think you were having a reading. This is kind of where I got the idea for the Speakeasy. And so I submitted, or I was going to submit, but then the pandemic happened, and I think it went online. And I was like, no, I don't want it to be online. Because at that point, you saw coming in. It's Zoom to death already. Hi. Are you here for the salon?
Yes.
Please come in. I just started.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you. We're so glad you're here.
Red tonight.
Yeah, line it up. So I had tried to get this particular essay published for like 3 years. It was my first essay that I wrote that I felt really represented my voice as a writer. 3 years, or at this time, 5 years ago now, I was in a place where I was like, if I don't do this now, it's never going to happen. So I just literally put pen to paper. And then I had a precarious visa situation, even though I'm a British citizen now. I was here on a visa, and that got curtailed because I switched jobs, and the job told me that they could sponsor me, and they lied. They didn't sponsor me, and I had to go back after I had sponsorship, so it was very distraught. But I was in a situation where I felt I was supported for the first time, which was ironic because I was actually in a new city. I moved to Washington, D.C., which I had worked in before, but I had not lived in before, and I didn't really know many people, but I had someone who was kind of like digitally holding my hand and encouraging me, and became my muse. So aside from the gym, my only refuge at that time was this wee cafe that was up the street from where I was, and I didn't really know anyone to hang out with or do anything with. So on the weekends, after I stopped working or going to the gym, I would go to this cafe and I would work on this essay. So this essay is about pregnancy loss that happened to me in my 20s, and I wanted to have something that showed this child existed at some point in some form. Even though I was very grateful to not have that pregnancy continue because I would have been a horrible mother. And it would have been just a terrible, terrible situation with someone who I should never procreate with. But then I still wanted to say this child was wanted, this child was loved, and the only thing I really have to give in this world is my writing. So I started writing this essay, and at first it was complete shite. It was just absolute garbage. But I spent a year honing it. And then I submitted it to everybody, and they all rejected it. So then Tom had this event, and I was like, well, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it in Edinburgh, so I'm back here, and that's what I'm going to do. And then pandemic happened, and the world shut down, and I was like, I'm not doing it over Zoom. I'm so zoomed out already. It was like March. It was like the first week of the pandemic, and I was already zoomed out. Anyway, it winds up getting published in British Vogue later that year in November, and it was published verbatim. I think they made just a couple of, I'm a writer who needs an editor, so I had some grammar issues. But it was published, and then 2 days later, it was trumped by Meghan Markle's New York Times essay on her pregnancy loss. But what that did do is it extended its lifespan on the Vogue website. So, without further ado, and I didn't create the title. But before I begin, I want to thank Arisa for being here. She's going to read from her book, Flip the Script. The theme for this evening is women's struggles. And it doesn't have to be sad. It could be something good as well. So I don't want to deter you guys. But thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And the Literary Revolution is being streamed. I want to thank Tom very much for hosting the Speakeasy. It's the third installment. It's still kind of experimental. I know Fiona was asking, who just came in. Thank you so much. You're now a friend. Is there a website? And then someone asked, you should have an Instagram. You should have a Twitter. And I'm like, I am still trying to figure this out. But it is a passion project. It's something that I envisioned doing for a long time. The fact that you came in with a Patti Smith badge or button is Patti Smith inspired me to do the literary salon. So I just took that as a sign. Thank you very much. All right, so I didn't create this title. I actually have a different title, and they did change the title, so I wasn't going to complain. All right. I celebrate a phantom birthday every year, remembering the miscarriage that shaped me. The doctor repeated herself, have you ever been pregnant? Her impatience, no doubt, was because I was blatantly fixated by her own well-developed baby bump. I had come to the appointment having just turned 40, now living in Washington, D.C., finding myself back in the United States after having been abroad for a few years. I had promptly christened my newly acquired American health insurance with a slew of fertility tests, or rather, as my doctor was correcting me, tests to measure your ovarian reserve. Yes, I nodded. And what happened with that pregnancy, she continued. I think back. I was at work when the cramping started. It was back in North Carolina. I had settled in the hipster enclave of Chapel Hill, clawing my way back through some semblance of a career, working as a producer for a local political radio program. I had done what nearly every American college girl who saw Coyote Ugly dreamt of doing. 6 months after graduation, I had packed 2 suitcases and purchased a one-way ticket to New York City, with a drive so strong, it saw me achieve my then dream job in just 6 months, and soon after, I choked. First in city bars, then alone in my 270 square foot Astoria micro apartment, before micro apartments were a thing. Until finally at 27, I was fooling myself into believing I was not living a 45-minute drive from where I went to high school and college. I was floundering and miserable, lost and broken, stoned and woefully lazy. I felt like a failure, crumbling under the pressure of having to master adulthood by the age of 30. And this was before we started curating our lives for Instagram. The blood began to soak through my pants, and I asked the station manager if I could leave. Just 8 years on from pissing and puking in parking lots, shagging with strangers in another stranger's bedroom, crying mascara off as you tell the best friend you will barely speak to after graduation how much you love her, By the time you blow out those 30 candles, you are supposed to have all of your youthful wildness neatly under control in order to achieve the baby boomer dictated standard, beginning with 1, an impressive title reflecting a senior leadership position, 2, a successful partner, 3, an enviable house in a swanky neighborhood, and 4, plans to procreate accordingly. Instead of discovering what matters to us in life, we are constantly on the work to achieve mission. Also, we can put the then self we've been cultivating on a shelf for the next 2 or 3 decades and turn our attention to what is essentially a parasite for the first 18 years of its life. I drove in silence. No music, no radio, no tears, no health insurance, so no hospital. At 27, I had been happily distracted from my failure by a guy who, like me, was working his way back from the heavy disappointment one can feel at that age. We told people he approached me in a local co-op with a simplistic yet charming introduction. We actually met through Craigslist when it was a relatively safe enough platform on which to find a roommate or a date, yet still embarrassing enough to lie about finding the latter. I had used Craigslist for both. I had found my roommate, the guy, and also a bedroom set that I roped both the guy and the roommate into moving for me. Breathing into the cramps, I concentrated on the road and thought back to the summer. It would be the last carefree summer of my youth, my summer of leisurely discontent. The fancy 3-letter New York medium acronym on my budding resume did little to serve me in the way of actual paid work, so I made do by temping for the local university. My first assignment was for a woman kind enough to forgive the Converse, graphic tees, and studded belt who could see that I was in desperate need of catching a break, earning a steady income, and recuperating. The university had a 4-day work week during the summer. This suited the guy just fine. We spent our days poolside in a smoke-filled haze, soaking up the sunshine, and drinking so much that we would have to empty the recycling bin nightly. My life was littered with joint roaches, beer bottles, and the charred remnants of a career that was over before it even started. My days were on repeat. After a few months of getting to know our bodies and eventually each other, he confessed he was still married and technically not divorced. On the day he conceded his divorce by failing to show up to court, he asked me to move in with him, and I did. My sole possessions, 2 suitcases, the Craigslist bedroom set, and a shitty late 80s black convertible I was too poor to buy outright and had to finance from a shady dealer. This is just a heavy period, I told myself. By November of that year, I realized I had not had a period since maybe September. I still can't remember. A pregnancy test would have only made it real. Thank you. So I just carried on and waited. For what, I wasn't sure, but I hoped it would be a period. Finally, I told him what I suspected. He was driving. I was in the passenger seat, watching for his reaction. His face turned red, and tears welled up in the corner of his eyes. "What do you want me to do about it?" he said. I never did take a pregnancy test. Not when that was his reaction. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing except what I had been doing. Rinse and repeat. In December, the cramping came. When he came home from work, I was shivering and tired, having already bled through 2 thick sanitary pads. I had showered and changed, but the bleeding had not stopped. I could tell he was annoyed when I excused myself again to the bathroom. This time, the pain had shifted, and I was sore. I felt something pass. My heart sank and my stomach knotted. I bit back the scream. I could no longer pretend this was just a period. Not when I could clearly see it was not. I scooped up the deflated gray flesh and cradled it in my hand. It was a sack, bloodied, so it could have been easily overlooked. On closer inspection, it looked like a bit like a miniature stomach. A tear slipped from my eye, surprising me. It grazed my cheek and trailed through the blood pooled in my palm. Even then, I begged for this not to be my only chance. Even now, the desperation in that plea remains. "I am so sorry," I whispered. "I want you so badly. I just wouldn't be good at it right now." I wondered if the sack was a boy. I wondered if it were the twins I had hoped for since I was a child. I felt the urge to dissect it open to find out. Instead, I thought back to when I was a girl with a basketball under my shirt pretending to be pregnant. I thought back to when I first heard the name I decided I wanted to call my son. I thought back to when I was 13 at a bookstore and instead of shoplifting R.L. Stein books like my friends were doing, I used my babysitting money to buy a children's book intended then for my future firstborn. A book I still have today, carefully saved after many, many moves. For when I am able to read from it with a baby in my arms and say, "Here is proof I have loved you since before you were born." I thought back to asking the plastic surgeon at 21 if I would still be able to breastfeed after my breast reduction. I thought of all I had wanted to achieve and had failed to do so. I thought back to the cigarettes and joints I had smoked and the alcohol I had drunk. I thought about the lack of savings and the absence of health insurance. I thought back to my own childhood and then remembered why what was happening was actually for the best. Gently with my finger, I curiously stroked the mask in my hand, slowly disassociating myself from the reality of what I was doing. I wrapped it in tissue, gently placing it back in the toilet. I let the sounds of the flush drown out my boyfriend's knocks of concern and my small cries of relief, regret, and guilt. The doctor drew a question mark next to previous pregnancies on the intake form. I celebrate a phantom birthday every year. I've spent the better part of 12 years wondering what would have happened if it had happened. I would have been the mother to an emerging teenager, but she most certainly would not be the woman I am today. She would not have been given the chance to experience what I have. Most of my growth and accomplishments came in my 30s. By just a couple of years, she would have missed out on the travel, education, and career I would go on to achieve. She would have had regrets. She would have grown resentful. She would have not had the time and space needed to break bad habits and mature. Much like my father did, she would have spent the baby's childhood wondering who she could have been. With each passing birthday, if I were to have had a baby that year, I figure out how old the child would be when I'm 60. Now I'm faced with wondering, what if I can't experience motherhood? Would everything I have worked for and am working to achieve, every obstacle I fought to overcome be for nothing if I can't have a child, can't be the mother I've been preparing myself to be? While I was packing my things to move back to the States, I nearly donated a children's book I bought when I was 13 to the charity shop. I pulled it from the pile and held it in my hands and thought of the ejected mass I held in my palm years ago. I finally allowed myself to properly cry. I mourned the child I lost, but I was not ready to mourn the child I had not yet had, the child I could still very well have. I placed the book in storage, safely tucked away as it had been for the past 27 years. So there I was again, back at the doctor's office a couple of weeks after our initial consultation when she outlined my options for a viable, albeit geriatric pregnancy, and I explained the unverified miscarriage from my 20s. At both visits, I burst into tears as soon as I walked through the office door. Now I was sat across from her, tears still stinging in my eyes, waiting to hear if that biological window remains open, with the fear of having missed my chance at motherhood possibly soon confirmed. She opened the file to refresh her memory and then looked at me and smiled. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming. So I'll give you a minute to grab a glass of wine so that you can join us. And then Arisa Qureshi is going to be reading from Flip the Script. I know you're a bit sore from having a popular speaking engagement, so I'm very happy that you still joined us. And then when she's done speaking, I'll read again from my last essay. But thank you so much for being here. Did you want to get a glass of wine? Or coffee or anything?
Yeah.
Oh, coffee? Yeah. We don't have any milk or sugar, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just on that.
Oh, thank you. Alyssa, like that. Thank you so much. This is right. Yeah. And just so you know that if you're interested, we do have copies of Flip the Script on sale. Tom can help you with that.
It is in what you just wrote in Flip the Script.
Sorry?
Is what you just read in Flip the Script?
No, mine was published in British Vogue, so it's on the website still. If you Google my name, which you can get from the Facebook event page, you'll see the essays I published. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
That's a limited amount of coffee as well, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. And, yeah, that was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you told me about it way back last week.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very emotional. Thanks for sharing it. And really,
Luckily, you're his own face.
no, not. Yeah, depends what defines hip hop emotional. I don't know. Thank you for inviting me, and I was asked to do this event to share from my book, Flip the Script. And before I do that, I thought I would just tell you a bit about me. So I'm a writer and editor from Edinburgh. And back in 2020, the lovely publisher 404 Inc., who published the script, opened up submissions for this series called Inklings, which the idea was it was short, kind of essay length books. So snippets of ideas that you could find interesting, that you learn something from, and you can just sit and just read it in one sitting if you wanted to. So I put a pitch in for this book because I love hip hop. I was basically in a nutshell. But at the time, I just lost my job, and as a lot of people did in the pandemic, it was a really horrible time. And I think this book kind of came at the perfect time, because I think if I didn't have this to work on over the pandemic, I probably would have lost my mind a lot more than I definitely did. I mean, I did lose my mind. I made a TikTok for my cat. Yeah, so,
Right on.
yeah, so I did lose my mind, but I'm glad I had this to work on and focus on. And I wouldn't have even done it if friends like Kristen sat right here didn't encourage me to do it. I wouldn't have done it. And I'm so glad I did. So Flip the Script is a book about women in UK hip hop, and in a nutshell, I wanted to focus on the UK because I've written a lot about American hip hop. I love all types of hip hop, but I just think that we're in a really exciting place at the moment in the UK as far as hip hop goes, but especially as far as women in the genre go. And I feel like some of the most exciting work that's being made is by women. And this isn't a kind of historical analysis or a deep dive. It's really just my love letter to women of the genre, and it's a kind of it's a personal look at why I love hip hop, but it features interviews with women from UK hip hop from across the years. And I guess the thing that made me quite sad was that when I came to write this, and there's many women I could have spoken to, I'm really grateful that I did get to interview the people I did, but there's not much out there about them. There's not much written or documented about these women, but yet they were such a big part of the genre and such a big part of making hip hop in the UK what it is today. So this is just my kind of way to document them, I guess, and an ode to the women that I think really matter and deserve attention and deserve credit. So I'm just going to read you the introduction to begin with, which kind of explains why and where it came from, basically. And where my love for hip hop, I guess, started. So the introduction is called Bad Bitch Alert. And like Linda Bree said, I'm a bit sick. Not COVID, don't worry, all good. But if I start coughing, I'll just go over there so nobody can hear me.
Just let me know when you stop, because I actually didn't read your bio and I apologize.
Oh,
So when you stop, I'll come back.
don't
and then
worry,
we can do another one.
you're all good. Okay, so Bad Bitch Alert. Hip hop is an art form that originated in the margins and can be simultaneously devastating and celebratory, an expression of pain, love, and desire, or an ode to the other, the underdog, and the underground. It is empowerment and subversion, but also full of contradictions and unresolved controversy. It's all of these things and much more. For me, though, it's the crucial association with social movements, revolutionary campaigns, and cultural awareness, as well as protest and activism that proves that hip hop can be a safe haven, especially for the oppressed. Hip hop has always been something of a safe haven for me. Many would likely consider this an unusual statement to make, with a phrase like safe haven perhaps viewed as the antithesis to hip hop. But creatively, mentally, and emotionally, It has been the place that I've landed throughout my adult life when my mind is in desperate need of a boost. My own connection to hip hop was forged in the 90s and early 2000s, where I grew up with a music taste largely defined by an older sister who gravitated towards R&B and hip hop as a teenager. I remember vividly dancing around our living room while MTV blasted out music videos for the likes of TLC, Biggie, and Aaliyah, just a few of our favorites. Just a side note, TLC are playing in Glasgow next month, and I'm going, and I'm so excited.
Love that. R.I.P.
Yeah. One of my earliest memories of my little brother also strangely revolves around the genre. Struggling to sleep as a newborn, we soon discovered that he had a natural fascination with the aforementioned music videos. So my sister taped a random selection that were of heavy rotation, including Tupac's Changes, Missy Elliott's Get Your Freak On, and Outkast's Miss Jackson. And my brother would gently play rock to sleep against the soothing backdrop of gangster rap and alternative hip hop. This unorthodox method would have him snoring away in less than 15 minutes, and so began the legacy of the tape. Why my fairly traditional Muslim South Asian mother encouraged this, I'll never fully understand, but I think she secretly really liked Missy Elliott. We were the type of first-generation immigrant kids that naturally rebelled against our parents' desire to assimilate into their South Asian heritage, and so we looked to music and TV instead for a different cultural fix. We brushed off Bollywood in favor of American hip-hop, and shunned our parents' Asian sitcoms and soaps for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Sister Sister. Black American culture spoke to us, and growing up in Scotland with very few brown people around, it was our only immediate bridge to other people of colour. Sure, it wasn't our culture, and it wasn't our experiences, but there was something in hip-hop in particular that made me feel like it was okay to be the only brown person in the room. My own teens were dominated by all-consuming love for Nirvana and everything grunge, but in the background, hip-hop was always there. When I was around 15, I started writing, mostly silly poems and rambling essays about music, but I was also obsessed with pulling apart lyrics, trying to really understand what was being said in the line. The golden age of hip-hop was where I found most comfort at this point. The stylistic innovations, eclectic cadences, and fast rhymes of the era drawing me in like no other form. This deep-seated interest never left me, only intensifying as I learnt more about the originators and the pioneers of the genre, as well as what was happening in the present in contemporary hip-hop. It all reached a climax at university. I took my interest a step further and I wrote my undergraduate dissertation on the forum. Studying English literature, hip-hop came up in exactly one slide in one lecture on vernacular poetry. But that was all the permission I needed. Sadly, my supervisor didn't see it that way. He encouraged me to switch topics, commenting, "I don't understand the point of hip-hop. I don't mind Jay-Z too much though." There were no people of colour on the department's teaching staff, and I felt as if I wasn't being taken seriously with my waspy hip-hop academia. Being determined and desperate to stick it to the old white man who just dismissed me, I went for it anyway. And the topic, defiance in hip-hop. I've never felt as passionate about researching and writing something as I did that dissertation, and it sparked a lifelong dream to write about music professionally and academically, which leads me quite nicely to the title of this introduction, Bad Bitch Alert. In 2015, I was commissioned to write my first article for the List magazine. The article, Bad Bitch Alert, was my take on how female MCs, including Lizzo and the Kelly 47, were challenging hip-hop's male reign. Women have occupied a vital space in hip-hop from its very beginnings in the Bronx in the 70s. But men have always dominated in one way or another, with gendered hierarchies becoming ingrained in the genre itself. I was lucky in that I was exposed to everyone from Salt and Pepper and Left Eye to Queen Latifah and Missy Elliott early on, thanks to my older sister. Women were very much a big part of everything I knew about hip-hop, and in many ways the reason I started falling for hip-hop in the first place. Seeing not only people of colour, but women of colour on screen, powerful, confident, and completely in control, contributed to what I believed was possible for us growing up. It contributed to the idea of this safe haven. It was obvious, though, in terms of the videos that were being played on MTV and the rappers that were climbing the charts, who was ruling the roost. I didn't care, though, before I knew anything about misogyny or stereotypes. Hip-hop was female empowerment epitomized. When I came to write that article, armed with years of research and analysis on the precarious relationship between women and hip-hop over the past few decades, I really did believe that something was changing in the pecking order. I still do all these years later, but crucially, it's not just changing where it all began in the US. Despite being the geographical focus of the script, the UK hasn't made a significant appearance yet, and there's a reason for that. Since my childhood was so heavily governed by American pop culture, I didn't listen to or really know what was happening in the UK scene. It wasn't until I reached my late teens that I started to properly appreciate the sheer strength, the vastity of UK hip-hop and its various iterations, People like Roots Manuva, Kleshnikov, and Miss Dynamite were just some of the artists rightfully taking up space for music collection and playlists, but it took some time. When I was finally able to go back and delve a bit deeper into how the country adopted this Black American art form, I realized that it wasn't just a case of adoption, it was the creation and restyling of the genre that spoke to an audience with a very specific and social political history. Many early UK rappers attempted to mimic the American sound down to the accent because it was popular and it was what could potentially lead to commercial success. There were others, like the formidable London Posse, who took this genre of music from Bronx and transplanted it into a very distinct and localized context, speaking for a generation of Black Brits born and raised in the UK. The descendants of the Windrush generation and their part in sound system culture played a key role in the formation of UK hip hop, giving it a unique and authentic narrative that reflected the social political landscape, while still engaging with core themes found in its American roots, like racism, violence, poverty, and justice. What always strikes me is how few women are included in any historical analysis of the genre or best of all time lists in the UK, when, just like in the US, women have been in attendance since day one. It's not about women not existing, it's about visibility, and often erasure. If hip hop is a vital cultural force and haven for the oppressed, how are the voices of many core figures so easily forgotten? As I've continued towards my goals of hip hop scholarship, I've increasingly felt drawn to celebrating these voices, and the genre keeps giving me all the more reason to. The unbelievable level of skill and finesse we're currently seeing bubbling up in UK hip hop, especially from women, only accelerating in the year marked by lockdowns, cancellations, and postponements. The winners of both the Scottish Album of the Year award and the Welsh Music Prize in 2020 were female rappers, Nova and Dea respectively. It indicated a significant shift in both the music industry's mentality towards women, with emphasis on women of colour, and the general public's approach to hip hop as a respected and valued art form. More, it hinted at how UK hip hop cannot and should not be viewed exclusively through the lens of its capital city. Hip hop can be that bridge for many people to other cultures, as it was for me growing up in Scotland. Within these regional scenes, women are not only thriving, but importantly dominating and leading the charge. When I wrote that Bad Bitch Alert article, Nicki Minaj had already been nominated for 7 Grammy Awards. Soon Cardi B would release her first full-length project, and Meg Thee Stallion was close behind with her debut single. It was a good time commercially for women in hip hop, and this has snowballed since. This is where I feel we are with hip hop in the UK, at the cusp of something incredible. It's time to embrace the changing of the guard. Flip the script as a homage flash to the women who are innovating and revitalizing the genre, the future MCs and leaders of hip hop, and those that were there at the very beginning. The list of names that deserve credit is limitless, but this is a celebration of what we have to look forward to. A snapshot of that musical magic. This is me welcoming you to my safe haven. May it become yours too.
Go ahead and give you the background. Like I said, I'm still, this speaking to Salon is still evolving, and so are my hosting duties and capabilities. Thank you so much for being here. Being from New York, I was really intrigued with the book. And Queen Latifah was the first woman I ever saw rap. And I've evolved to actually doing hip hop to yoga to Wu-Tang. I find that relaxing. But hip hop, being from New York, from Queens, there just wasn't women, until you mentioned Missy Elliott, but we had Yo-Yo and MC Light and Queen Latifah. The first things that I'm coming to. So it has evolved. But when you talked about the UK accent, UK, it made me think of Iggy Azalea. Anyway, so thank you, Arusa Kreshe, for being here. Arusa is a writer and editor based in Edinburgh and a passionate advocate for diversity and accessibility within arts and culture. She is the former editor of The List, and she writes mostly about music. Most recently, Flip the Script, a book about women in UK hip-hop published by 404 Inc. Her work has appeared in The Scotsman, Clash, The Guardian, and Gold Flake Paint, Time Out, and New Musical Express, and NME, get it out, and more in 2017. She was shortlisted for PPA, Scotland's Young Journalist of the Year Award, and was also the winner of the Alan Wright Award for Quality Writing in Arts Journalism. She is on the board of the Scottish Music Centre, which is where I believe I found her. You were giving us a talk. and is a trustee of the Saltaire Society. So please let me give a welcome to Aretha again. Thank you so much. Are you okay to read more? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to read you a bit from chapter 1, just a part of it, so that leave you wanting more and you can buy the book and read the rest. Just when you were saying about the thing about accents, it's really interesting because I think people still don't take UK rappers that seriously because of accents around the region. And speaking to some American rappers, it's still a case of don't really know what you guys are saying, which isn't mad to me. But I think it's changing. It is definitely changing. But I like the fact that we have our own identity with our accents, and yeah, that's a great thing to celebrate. Okay, so chapter 1 is called "The Woman Who Built the Scene," and I started the book with, I guess, who I consider like one of the earliest women in hip hop in the UK, which is Kiki Crew. And I love them, and it's kind of a bit of a weird experience being able to chat to them because I consider them kind of my heroes a little bit. And they spent so much time. It was over the pandemic, so it was over Zoom, but they spent so much time chatting to me, and even now they still email me every so often. They're just lovely, lovely people who clearly just care about the scene and care about the genre. So this first chapter is mostly about them. Okay, so the woman who built the scene. When considering the history of women in hip hop, there are some names that will always stand out. There's Debbie D, member of DJ Marley Marl's Juice Crew, Heavily Pooh, who joined DJ Cool Herc's Herculoids, and Lisa Lee, who is an African ambassador to Universal Zulu Nation. Then, of course, there's Sharrock, considered the first prominent female MC, and Mercedes Ladies, the first all-female group in hip hop. These names are a fundamental piece of the wider hip hop puzzle, while simultaneously being relegated to the footnotes of history. Without these women, the genre would be nowhere near as rich, bold, and full of fire as it is today. These women were the pioneers. There's a notorious story in the culture's canon, that of Roxanne Shante. Native to Queens, New York, she began rapping as a child, quickly becoming a central figure in the scene at just 14, thanks to her battle rap track, Roxanne's Revenge. Written in response to UTFO's Roxanne, Roxanne, it was a song about a fictional woman that kept brushing off the male group's advances. In her daring and confrontational response, Shante embodied this fictional character, creating an instant hit and inspiring a whole generation of diss tracks in the process. She wasn't a one-hit wonder or a mere marketing pawn. She had undeniable skills as an MC and battle rapper. As a young woman, she was considered a threat to many men in the scene. It was at the annual MC Battle for World Supremacy in 1985 where this came to a head. The competition, known for creating legends and spotlighting the best MCs in the game, was the setting for an event that didn't Shanti's right. The only woman competing, she made the final against Busy B. Starsky. Despite being the better rapper and clear favourite, she was defeated in what can only be described as a fix, ending with her in tears. Listening back to the audio from the battle, which exists on YouTube, and do listen to it, it's amazing. Shanti dominates. She cheers alone as she rolls out disc after disc, confirm this. Starsky does well, but pales in comparison, as Shanti gradually gets increasingly riled up, energy never faltering. She delivers the kind of verbal takedown that makes you proud of her all these years later. In the excellent illustrated anthology of Motherlode, writer Clover Hope details the battle, and Judge Curtis Blow purposely giving Shanti a low score because he didn't like the optics of a girl winning a rap battle, no matter how much she outperformed their opponent. It's fairly well established, even by Blow himself, that Shanti did in fact win. In Kathy Iandoli's God Save the Queens, she notes how many viewed Blow's actions that day as his attempt to prevent women from leading the next phase of hip-hop. Iandoli quotes Busy B, who told her, "I think they weren't ready for a female to take the helm," later herself asking, so what would have happened if that new guard had been led by a woman? The events of that battle always stuck with me as a significant moment in early hip-hop that marked its future. Not only because Shanti came closer to dethroning her male counterparts than anyone else before her, but also because it is widely acknowledged that Shanti should have won. She was the best rapper there, but in the words of Clover Hope, everyone told her that she was nice for a girl. In all facets of the music industry, women have been told that they're good for a girl, they make decent music for a girl. It's perhaps one of the core reasons women are left out of the history of genres that they revolutionised. That same year in the UK, another competition was taking place. Two young women from Clapham, South London, were about to storm a national rap championship at the Y Club, which would launch their entire career. They would quickly go on to capture the attention of the UK hip-hop scene, as well as key industry figures like John Peel. But 2 years earlier, in 1983, MC Remedy, Debbie Price, and Susie Q, Susan Banfield, were just getting started as Cookie Crew, inspired by what was happening in the New York music scene. Cookie Crew predated other prominent women in UK hip-hop, like She Rockers and Wee Papa Girl rappers, not to mention Money Love, who would go on to settle in New York in 1988 to massive success. As one of the first female hip-hop groups in the UK, they were also among the first to battle the hurdles women faced in the genre, constantly compared to adjacent male rappers, forced to prove themselves despite their evident success, and constantly pushed in different and often contradictory directions. We started listening to hip-hop because Debbie would go to New York with her family in the early 80s, record the radio on a cassette tape, and bring it back for us to listen to, Susie explains. We would listen to it at home, and it was amazing to us. We started to hear different styles of rap on these cassette tapes that were basically New York radio. And we said to each other, we could do that, so let's try to write something. The pair would spend time in the park near where they grew up, with their crew of friends, roller skating and playing double dutch. Once they started writing, this was the ideal place to test the waters with their rhymes. Around the same time, BBC broadcast a documentary called Beat This, The Hip-Hop History, which caught the attention of the young rappers to be. In the documentary, Malcolm McLaren, known for his contributions to punk rock via managing the Sex Pistols, talks about his introduction to Africa Bambaato's Zulu Nation in the South Bronx. Malcolm McLaren did this documentary in a place in Covent Garden where breakers used to hang out, Susie recalls. We started to connect the dots with everything that was happening in the hip-hop scene. There were graffiti artists down there were breakers, and there were rappers. Everyone started to try a little something. And this included Susie and Debbie, who were writing raps, not realizing that there weren't really any other girls doing the same thing locally. We had no clue because we saw American girls doing it. We were listening to female rappers like Shell Rock, Lisa Lee, and Debbie Lee, and we were influenced by them. There were a lot of rappers out there at the time, all male, but we did see Michelle Devet, also known as Mystery MC of Family Quest. We saw her rapping on stage. She was freestyling, she blew us away. She was the first female rapper that we had seen in England. I didn't see any others before her. Before long, they were accepted into the fold as rappers in their own right, respected for their rhymes. It was at this point in 1985 that we heard about a rap competition being run by a young Tim Westwood, with prize money and a recording contract up for grabs. We heard about it, we thought about it, and the boys that we used to hang out with were saying, you could win this. And so our friends forced us to go down there. We put our name down for the first week. We saw all the rappers that were taking part and then thought, okay, we'll go back next weekend, take our name off the list because this is looking really hard and we're not sure. The night came and we thought, we're just going to go out and do this because it doesn't matter. I remember the stage being so big, we had to lift Debbie up onto it. We rapped over African Bavata and the Soul Sonic Forces Planet Rock. It was fast. It was so fast. Basically, we killed it. Debbie adds with a grin. It was a blur as well because the stage felt like a platform so we could see everybody. We could see all the guys from Battersea who came with us through our support network. The crowd was just going crazy. They were cheering throughout the whole performance. It ended and we were buzzing. When they made the announcement of the night that we won, it was like our feet didn't touch the ground. It was a complete blur. But it was sheer excitement. We went away feeling like champions after that. The world was our oyster. A direct contrast to Shanti's experience, the duo became the names to watch for the season. They took the prize money, but not the contract. We weren't interested in the recording contract. It was a good job, we didn't take it. Because thinking back, it probably would have been a mess, Debbie notes. We went for a meeting. I just remember getting on the tube, going somewhere, having the meeting, and coming out unsure. We knew nothing about the business. We just wanted to hang out and build a reputation on the scene. Thank God we didn't sign whatever that contract was. But we did get a trophy. That was just the start of Cookie. It gave us the opportunity to really soak it up, because we were obsessed with hip-hop culture, Susie explains. Hip-hop culture to us was graffiti, breaking, DJing, rapping, body popping. Those were the elements. And there was a whole culture around Covent Garden, the nucleus of London's hip-hop scene, which embodied everything about hip-hop, from the way we dressed to the way we spoke. Even though this clear identity was being forged in London, the influence of American hip-hop is prevalent and crucial to kickstarting the movement. Cookie Crew were asked to do a show with Africa Lambata, who was touring with DJ Red Alert and Lisa Lee, someone that Susie and Debbie looked up to from the start. We got to be on that show with other people from Covent Garden. That, to me, out of everything we've done, and we performed at Wembley, we supported Bobby Brown, we lived in New York, we worked with many different artists. Doing that show, and Lisa Lee being in the audience, was the most nerve-wracking thing I think I've ever done in Call Susie. We did a rehearsal where she was sitting in the auditorium watching us, and she told us off for not, for one, looking nervous, two, standing still, and three, not giving it enough. So we went away, really annoyed with ourselves, went home, practiced, came back correct. I'll stop the chapter there.
Yeah, are you okay, or do you want to take a break?
Yeah. Do you want to read something?
Yeah, I'll read it the next essay.
Okay.
And then you'll close us out, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's just, I love the way you read it too, because I could hear the conversations that you were having. You read it very well. And it's also kind of making me nostalgic for New York. Moni Love, that's a name from my childhood that I had not thought of, probably since, I remember reading it, but then it quickly escaped my mind, so. But thank you. And also just remember, Flip the Script is available if you're interested in picking up a copy. Please do. Thank you, Arisa Ben. One more time. So I'm going to take it back to some melodrama. This is an essay. The theme for tonight is women's struggles. Obviously, Arisa's writing is about women struggling in hip hop, and mine is much more personal. I write personal essays that sometimes get published. This particular one was considered too controversial. So I had written the essay, it was accepted. They asked for my photograph for the byline. This was the Independent. I submitted it. And then the editor came back and said, my editor said that it's a bit too personal. And so we can either pull it or we can publish it anonymously. And I thought, well, I'd rather have my words be read than just stuck in my head. So fine, publish it anonymously. But tonight I'm reading it. So, apparently the people I mention could be easily identified, although they couldn't because it's the UK. It's lots of people. But here I am in Edinburgh reading it, and they could be outside. We don't know. The title is What I Learned About Sisterhood from My Irrational Hatred for My Lover's Ex. We ran smack into each other at my gym. I couldn't hide my indignation. Her jaw slightly dropped as she visibly flinched. We held each other's gaze longer than you should with a complete stranger, because we each knew who the other was. She was the ex-partner of my ex-lover, the mother of his daughter, a woman I've never met or spoken to, yet had despised for years. Suddenly, her expression changed, catching me off guard. Brushing past, I escaped into the locker room. The entire confrontation couldn't have been more than seconds, but it replayed in my mind for months. My brain wouldn't allow me to register the look on her face. We had encountered each other only once before. I was laughing with pals when she walked by me a little too closely. As my eyes followed her, I met my ex-lover Stare, who stood by watching. I was never his partner. I had told him for years I didn't want to be with him because of their situation. I didn't resent him having a child, but felt guilty getting involved when her daughter was so young. She was only 4 when I met him. I was afraid to be collateral damage after what I assumed would be their eventual reunion. Her face hadn't relayed shock. He must have told her I was a member. But there was something else. Was it pity? Had he disclosed that my mother had recently died? Her own mother had passed not even 2 years before. I closed my eyes and replayed the encounter. Her jaw dropped, she flinched, but then she ever so slightly stepped forward, quickly closing and opening her mouth before I turned away. I couldn't put my finger on what her expression conveyed, but something did click. The years-long, deeply held animosity I felt for her was gone. That's profound progress, my therapist said. I had been in therapy for months prior, specifically to get over him and to figure out this irrational hatred for her, hypothesizing both as the source of my depression.
Missing him terribly, I was filled with immense regret, which was exasperated by lockdowns. A relationship with him would mean a constant struggle to contain my resentment over her steadfast presence. Resentment sparked from being lectured growing up to never involve myself with a man who had children from a previous relationship. My Nana had been engaged to my Papa for 3 months before he confessed he was married with a child. My grandmother's resentment lingered in her old age. It wasn't only inherited resentment that spurred my animosity for his ex. I didn't feel negativity toward the women after me. I've always wanted him to be happy. But when it came to his daughter's mother, I was adamantly against their close relationship, maliciously nagging him over their lack of boundaries, cutting him down for it, and especially her any chance I could. Why do you hate her so much? He would ask. You're punching down. It infuriated me that he seemed to have an elevated threshold for her while holding me to a higher standard. Still, when he admitted I was justified in highlighting their blurred lines, I couldn't find it in me to relent, knowing I should appreciate his intent on loving his daughter's mother. I once told him I thought we should try a relationship, as I do really love him. It's not enough, he replied. Nothing will change. He was right. Aside from not wanting to micromanage their boundaries, it's hard to not be seen as just a girlfriend to a man who's either been married or has a child with another. I didn't want to be just his girlfriend. But this hatred was not founded in internalized misogyny. Something was intensely triggered in me the moment I found her on social media. In therapy, I realized she reminded me of my estranged mother. Odd to admit, yet very much true. Through her content, I recognized similarities. The same struggle with motherhood, the change of appearance resulting from losing a sense of self. This was confirmed as he began to confide in me. Using their situation, I was able to work through my mother wound, healing the deeply buried, lifelong pain and anger I held since a child. After not seeing my mom for nearly 20 years, I found space in my heart to forgive her, relating to her as a woman before she unexpectedly died. Something I would not have been able to achieve if not for the existence of my lover's ex. With a grateful heart now open, I discovered empathy for his ex, something my lover had always implored of me. Had my awareness and maturity come earlier, I could have used our mutual love for this man to forge a friendship, reached out to her when she was struggling, in turn supporting him and putting their child first. How much heartache could have been spared if I had introduced myself when she was so clearly making her presence known. Risen above to become her sister instead of allowing my animosity to deteriorate my relationship with him to the point of estrangement. If given the chance to revisit this relationship with him, my lesson learned would be to start with her. Recently, while lying awake at night thinking of him, my brain finally allowed me to register the look on her face when we saw each other. She had wanted to speak to me.
Thank you. Are you ready, or do you want a line break? Okay. Does anybody want a pine break? Nope. All right. Rock on.
That was so good. Really, again, when we met last week, you were telling me about it. Yeah, I knew it was going to be a really powerful story. So
Thank you.
thanks for sharing it.
Thank you for sharing your book with us.
Okay, I'm just going to read a bit of this chapter. This is chapter 3. It's called "The Woman Who Changed the Game." And I guess at this point in the book, we're kind of coming up to more contemporary hip hop in the UK. And like I said, I got the chance to speak to a lot of really, really wonderful women for this book. But so many of them are just not documented anywhere. So there might be some names in this chapter you have heard of, or you might not have heard of. But hopefully, you be inspired to go and seek them out. Actually, good point. Well, yeah. While I remember, if you buy a copy of the book, or even if you don't, I made a playlist to go along with it on Spotify, and it's got a little QR code here you can scan and take to the playlist.
And it's really good.
I keep updating it, so I think it's on like 5 hours at the moment, but it keeps going because I keep adding new things to it. So I follow it, and you might get something new from it. Okay, so the women who changed the game. Why does it always have to do with my gender? commented Little Sims in a 2016 Vice interview. Why can't I just do what I want to do freely without feeling like people are trying to put me in a box all the time? You know how annoying that is when you feel like you're doing something greater than life? You're always just a female rapper. Sims makes a very valid point, and one that has been percolating in my own mind since embarking on this project. Why focus on gender when gender doesn't specifically have any bearing on an individual's talent? It's a point raised by numerous interviewees too, with many stating their preference to simply be referred to as a rapper as opposed to a female rapper. In my day-to-day, I too make no obvious distinction when discussing genres of music. It's band, not female band, DJ rather than female DJ, and singer, but never songstress. My definition of woman is trans-inclusive, so I'd always be wary of making any gender-based assumptions. However, it's a disparity that exists so widely in the music industry that has resulted in less pay, less respect, and less credit for women and gender minorities over the years. In terms of talent, gender isn't relevant. In terms of treatment, visible legacy and structural issues it is. Women in Control's 2020 A Seat at the Table report reinforces why this conversation cannot be minimized. The report, which analyzes the makeup of team, board members, chairperson, and CEO positions across 12 UK music industry trade bodies, highlights that only 27% of CEOs across 11 music trade body boards, and that 34% of board members across 12 music trade body boards are women. The report is even more brutal when considering women of colour. 0% of CEOs across 11 music trade bodies are black women. While this report focuses on roles behind the scenes, such an imbalance filters down. In this sphere, commercially successful women are seen as a rarity, and so only one woman or group can generally be equipped with full support and creative intention at a time. In an article for PRS for Music M magazine, hip-hop artist and lecturer Asata Sharif explains how this mentality is what leads to distancing from the female rapper leader. The issue becomes even more evident when looking at shorter career sized women who often have to endure homogenization from the media, in which they are only acknowledged as part of a group and are overlooked as individuals. As a result, many choose to distance themselves from the female link-up categorization, appearing in all-women editorial features or one-off all-female collaborations, as the depiction often fails to reflect their creative reality. When we speak, Isata clarifies why she believes it's still important to spotlight women, even though there is a hesitation in being defined by gender. The toxic traits are still there, she says. I think things have moved on in some ways, but we still have that fight against patriarchy, misogyny, and sexism. Some small battles have been won, and now women are visibly making their own choices. I see a place for discussing it, and there needs to be a place to highlight things that are not highlighted. I'm not against gatherings and talking about girls, just like I'm not against people highlighting Black history achievements because I know that the world is whitewashed. Isata began her career in the early 2000s under the name Taurus Slave when UK hip-hop, its various offshoots, including grime, were beginning to fully seep into public consciousness, thanks in part to the work of pirate radio stations like Juice FM and Mission FM. Isata herself started out on pirate radio and says that it was normal at that time for girls to be involved. She didn't encounter much hostility until later, when it came time to advance her career. But she admits that there were some wounded egos and some friction from men who were afraid of being outshined by the girls. Whatever goes on within the industry is worse when it comes to black music, she continues, and then even worse when it comes to black women. It is reflective of the whole industry. Certainly, I felt more patronized, and it wasn't that I wasn't feeling let in, but I wasn't being given the time creatively. Isata, a talented producer and lyricist, is the founder of Doctored Sound, an independent record label and consultancy agency that delivers music education programs and workshops for all ages. With her experience in the industry at the turn of the millennium, Isata is candid about the capitalist influence of the genre, and as she noticed this manifesting in the early noughties. The relationship between capitalism and hip-hop is so strong that you can't separate yourself from it, she says. When you look at the history of the recording industry, you can see how hip-hop was literally put into the machine. From the beginning, it's been a commodity of the record industry and commercialized because of what sells, what's appealing, or what people want. In the UK, this is perhaps best exemplified when looking at the massive success of pirate radio and how this was in time co-opted for mainstream audiences. Richard Bramwell makes an excellent point about this in his writing around the 2002 launch of BBC Radio 1 Extra. Indeed, the British Broadcasting Corporation's launch of Radio 1 Extra with the remit to play the best in contemporary black music can be seen as a direct response the success of pirate radio in meeting the needs of an audience that, at the turn of the century, the BBC was not. The popularity of One Extra, which recruited DJs from local pirate radio stations, and the launch of other platforms, like the cable TV station Channel V, signaled where the pop and grime were headed and how the mainstream media capitalised on its enthusiasm. This was a particularly fruitful period for music in the genre too, women in the genre too, with voices like Wildflower, Estelle, Tempra, as well as this like Baby Blue, Shiesty, and Lady Sovereign, emerging from the underground and finding success. Miss Dynamite, who was popular on pirate radio, released her debut album, A Little Deeper, in 2002, and went on to win the prestigious Mercury Music Prize. She became the first solo black female artist and the youngest ever to win the prize, marking that the genre was being taken seriously by industry gatekeepers. Simon Frith, chairman of the judges of the Mercury Music Prize, said, "It is a new kind of voice we haven't heard before. Miss Dynamite has a clear vision of what she wants to do. She can do it without being drawn into the cliches of the music industry." Dynamite represented something vastly different, a mainstream return in the UK to the cookie crew era of Defiant and skillfully articulated lyrics of speaking your truth over and above anything that can be deemed superficial. Afraid to Fly, one of her tracks, addresses the cold, cold world of war, while Brother is an emotional ode to her younger sibling, who is Akala, people know, who appears in the album's rousing finale, Get Up, Stand Up. Yeah, you learned something new today. It was an indication of how rappers in the UK were maintaining that distinctive Britishness, attempting to break down sexist stereotypes that were so prevalent abroad. Against an industry pushing that sex sells, rappers like Dynamite came in without compromising vision or truth towards corporate demands and stole the show of the business. I'll stop there.
I have her book next to my bathtub, and I read just a few pages, so now I have to read the rest of it. Thank you so much. I'm so proud to have you headline the Speakeasy, the third installment. And that book was very special to me, just because I'm from New York and I didn't know much about UK hip hop. And then you realize what I listened to was from the UK. And it's also evolving. I know it's not women, but young fathers, and hearing their Scottish accent in their reign. That's always special to me as well. And not to assume, but thank you for the male presenting figures in our audience tonight. That was nice to see, especially since it's women's struggles. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Tom for hosting. I'm so proud of this little thing I've created, and it's still evolving. But whenever I get people like Arusa, it makes me feel like it's legit. It's happening. And then you guys came, and it's great. So have some wine, mingle, buy some books, Flip the Script, so you can get that wonderful playlist. And thank you again. Thank you. I don't know. I have a couple of authors in mind for the next one, so I have to search now. Okay. Yeah. Is that the playlist count? Thank you. Yeah, so the next one I'm thinking will be about Scottish music. Oh, cool. Yeah, and I don't normally read, I read like a tad bit, but I usually don't read the book. It's just that we had someone pull out, so it will be less